Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Duke, and this is The Takeaway. We are together with Alex Newman. Alex, you know, the craziness going on in our schools is a constant theme of our conversations together, and here we are. And as everybody knows, in the modern American educational system, every single form of censorship is coming from the left. There are no posses of right-wingers trying to get Harry Potter thrown out of school libraries anymore. Long gone are those days. Every aspect of censorship now is coming from the left, and they're doing it, we're told, for our own good. Talk about the banning of books in a Duluth school, a Duluth high school, Duluth, Minnesota.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Duke. And so basically what happened is the school district up in Duluth, Minnesota, decided that Huckleberry Finn, which is, of course, an anti-racist book, and To Kill a Mockingbird, which is also an anti-racist book, were too racist to be included in the school curriculum. So generations of Americans have read these books. I read these books. Growing up overseas, I read these books. And I don't think that you can really understand American culture without having read these books. In fact, I have my own disagreements with the books and with Mark Twain, and you know that's okay. It's okay to disagree with authors and still read them. And yet, not in Duluth, Minnesota. They have decided that because these books, you know, one of them, Mark Twain's book, was written in the mid-1880s. Because they use words that are no longer considered acceptable, politically correct. The NAACP said the words have been oppressing people for 200 years. Now the books are officially out, and they're looking for replacements as we speak.
Well, the words are offensive. The words have been oppressing people for hundreds of years, unless you're a rapper who throws it around like they're chewing gum, right? I mean, or you're Lady Beyonce, right? That's a whole different issue. But the thing about this, these aren't just anti-racist books. Huckleberry Finn is not just a book that's anti-racist. The great African-American novelist who wrote one of the seminal books of the 20th century, The Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison, written 3 or 4 years before To Kill a Mockingbird, he once said of Huckleberry Finn that it is the most moral book on race ever written. So arguably one of perhaps the greatest African-American novelist of the 20th century, not named Toni Morrison, pointed to Huckleberry Finn as a huge classic that deals with racial issues in ways that were sensitive and sophisticated way before their time. In fact, Jim, the slave, is the hero of that story. Even though the N-word is used repeatedly, every time the N-word is used in that story to refer to Jim, it just magnifies the greatness of that character and trivializes those who use the word. And yet now we can't expose high school kids to that book. Same thing with Atticus Finch in To Kill a Mockingbird. Do you know, Atticus Finch was voted the #1 American movie hero in all of cinema history by Hollywood elites. And now you can't use that book because the N-word appears in it. This is not good for kids. You are not sheltering. You're sheltering them from that which they absolutely must be exposed to if you want to tamp down so-called racism in this country today.
Yeah, and I mean, as you mentioned, you know, the rappers, it's not like these kids are not going to hear that word. I mean, they can turn on any radio station, they can put on any modern-day rapper that's constantly promoted on the MTV and all the rest of the establishment propaganda machine, and they'll be throwing out that word like it's nothing all the time. And, you know, you don't hear about them oppressing anyone. So, you know, it really is a tragedy. They really are erasing culture. And, you know, as I pointed out in my column over at the Newman Report, you know, once they got rid of God, you know, the centrality of God to the American experience, you know, the founders said they hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and they're all endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights. You know, once they got that out of the schools, you know, now it's just a mop-up operation, right? Now we just got to get rid of any final books that, you know, give people any inkling of American culture, American history, and they'll have a fresh slate to start over on. You know, I feel like we're going through the Cultural Revolution. We're going to erase every element of our culture because it might have a word that offends somebody or oppresses someone, as the NAACP put it. And, you know, frankly, it's outrageous. And Duluth, Minnesota is not the first district. Biloxi, Mississippi banned Huckleberry Finn and these books for the same reason. And you had people speaking out there. The National Coalition Against Censorship said, hey, you know, when we look at what books to provide to children, we're not supposed to be looking at whether the book makes them comfortable or uncomfortable. We're looking at, does it have educational value? These books indisputably do. And, you know, it's tragic that our country is going through this now, and it really, I think, is a sign of the times, and it's very troubling.
Well, you've got university professors in Californian colleges who are making the same argument that these books should not be read. We must remove them or edit them, re-edit these books, go back to the great American classics and rewrite them the way they should have been written to conform to liberal sensibilities. And speaking of the NAACP and how certain words are toxic and offensive, I like the fact that they keep the word colored in their name. Right? Shouldn't we start with the NAACP? They are not the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. That is a slur. It is a racial stigma. It is something that is, if anybody else used it, including rappers, we would raise an eyebrow. But the NAACP, of course, the venerable old NAACP, feels no compulsion whatsoever to stop offending people who are offended by the word color. And this is a big deal. I mean, this idea of censorship, it's not just books. Comedy now, by the argument they're making, comedy, by definition, is going to make people laugh at things that other people would be sad about. Comedy, words like irony and satire now. We can't use satire. To write a satirical text has to be stopped for the very same reasons, because people could misread it. You read a satire, right? A satire that paints an extreme situation in order to teach kids a certain lesson. Well, that's going to be offensive because some kids won't see through the satire. Where does this end?
Well, that's a good question. And we see in Sweden, for example, in 2008, the government investigated the Bible for hate speech to see if it violated the hate speech laws, and they determined, the Justice Ombudsman determined that it did. And they said, well, if they were to rewrite certain passages, then it could conform with our law. And, that seems to be the direction that we're going in, where truth becomes hate speech, culture becomes oppressive, all of our traditions, all of our history needs to be wiped clean. It's not enough to just look back and say, wow, we disagree with that today. Now we have to go back and just erase it and pretend it didn't happen, protect the kids from even reading it. And, we saw what has happened in all the countries that have pursued this, right? And I mean, it ties in with, taking down all the monuments. And the communists, the Marxists, the revolutionists have always had this idea that, to rewrite the future, to change the future, they need to rewrite the past. I mean, in 1984, they talked about this, right? The main character, he would flush the text down the memory hole if they, if they didn't conform with the current paradigm. And so this is really troubling. I mean, for so many reasons. And this is just a microcosm of what's happening across the whole country. And it's going to get worse if people don't finally get up and say, you're not going to do that anymore.
Well, C.S. Lewis once famously observed, and this is a paraphrase, that those tyrants who tyrannize you for your own good, what they think your own good is, they're the ones who'll never stop. The greedy man who tyrannizes you for your money, he can sometimes get enough money. But the person, the progressive, who tyrannizes you for your own good will never stop, never leave you alone, never relent. Alex Newman in The Takeaway, thank you so much. If you enjoyed that video, please consider following us online and also consider a tax-deductible donation so we can continue to produce quality videos like the one you just watched. I'm Dr. Duke. Thanks for watching.